Greetings. My name is Gabriel. A little about us. Our home is underground cities. Our appearance is of the people of the Nordic race. We live for about 800 years. For ease of perception, you can call us the Great White Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of the Grail, the Brotherhood of Odin, or, for example, the Union of the Enlightened Ones. As I said, we had and still have many names. And so, today I will tell you about the philosophy of unity. Inner knowledge of what constitutes creation itself. All unity is a single consciousness, manifested at 7 different levels. Everything that surrounds us, visible and invisible, living and inanimate, is a manifested consciousness. All people, regardless of gender, race or religion, are also manifested elements of the common consciousness of the all-unity. Each is an equal and all-powerful replica of the whole. Unity does not require love, worship, reverence, or sacrifice. It does not need praise and does not require fear or reverence. All unity is equally manifested in everything and therefore has no image or form. It doesn't need an image. The symbol of the unity is a schematic representation of its nature and nothing more. For him, there are no scriptures of prophets and authorities. It dwells everywhere in everything and in everyone. It is the essence of everything that was and will be without exception. Everyone who lives with the knowledge of the true nature of the all-unity is not obliged to implant this philosophy, to accept it or reject everyone's personal choice. In addition to these postulates, there are 7 more laws of creation, 7 delusions that prevent one from coming to truth, and 7 vices. Knowledge of the 7 laws allows you to observe the main rules on which the entire creation is based in reality. Knowledge of delusions frees from captivity and mental shackles that prevent you from thinking critically. The knowledge of the 7 vices allows us to understand what those who wish to prevent people from coming to the truth use. The law of mentalism: everything is a manifested thought and consciousness. The law of correspondence is above and below, both outside and inside the law of change. Transmutation: all energy is transformed when it is born. The law of unity: many everything is one, one is all. The law of equilibrium: yin, yang, unity and struggle of 2 opposites in perfect balance. The law of generation: growth, extinction: everything that has a beginning has an end. The law of cyclicity: everything is cyclical, there is no linearity. 7 delusions: that matter is primary, and spirit is secondary. That matter and spirit are 2 opposite substances, and there is a huge gap between them. That time as you know it exists. That outside of you, somewhere high above you, there is one omnipotent deity, separate from you, who controls you. That the body is more important than the soul, and that it is only and exclusively necessary to maintain and nourish it. That there is only one life that you live in, only one dimension that you live in. That in order to be happy you need to accumulate and appropriate. 7 vices: selfishness, pride, envy, lust, ignorance, laziness, greed. You ask me, what are our philosophical and political beliefs and tasks? So to speak, our main task is to observe the events that are taking place in the world, tracking the prophecies of future changes, as well as storing knowledge, which in the future should play an important role in the fate of humanity and the transition to a different form of existence. Most of us, like our ancestors, who also at different times in the history of mankind played the role of enlighteners and helped raise the level of consciousness of society through literature and art, and later cinema and music, and still consider our main task to be the transmission of the most important knowledge for the awakening of humanity through certain chosen ones as people, as a rule, also from among the scientists, inventors, writers, historians, researchers, scriptwriters and directors, as well as artists and composers. As a rule, this is done either directly, which happens quite rarely, or telepathically. That is, if, for example, we have a new project in front of us and we have to introduce some idea into society, but so that it is not particularly intrusive, then one of us is appointed as a kind of curator, informant and patron, sometimes, according to your earthly time, for quite a while. A long time over one person, as a rule, from among the most gifted and creative. The appointed one begins at first to unobtrusively penetrate telepathically into the consciousness of his protege, often during sleep, and sometimes in the middle of the working day, and inspire him with some idea, but so that he thinks that he was not inspired, but his type was inspired by the muse, or he came to this myself. The main task is to bring a person to such a state that he will give up everything and sometimes, like an obsessive, will start working on an idea planted in his mind, be it a book, a film, a picture or something else. A mission is considered complete if what its creator presents to the public pushes some certain limits in the minds of people and shifts the established stereotypes or cliches, completely changing people's lives and the entire course of world culture. We also often work with inventors and, as I said, brilliant screenwriters and writers, so a lot of what you see around you, namely outstanding pictures, films, musical works, as well as inventions without which life is simply unthinkable, as a rule, appeared thanks to our suggestion through especially gifted individual personalities. It is not for nothing that even in ancient times there were gods who were responsible for the development of arts and literature. Well, or, in the end, muses. And that's all of us. This is our main vocation. And finally, I will say a little about myself and our political and social views. Our union of several communes, contrary to what anyone who read the above by me might think, is far from homogeneous, and as I said above from the very beginning, two main points of view prevailed in our ranks and among our ancestors about how we should behave in relation to people living on the surface of this planet. Accordingly, I would designate these two groups in accordance with the generally accepted terminology in your country as a kind of right-wing radicals and moderates. In general, the ratio is approximately 40% to 60%, respectively. As you may have noticed, I belong to one of the moderates and we are a little more numerically. The main dilemma that we face is extremely simple and old as the world and takes its origins almost from the very first days of our appearance here, which I will talk about in more detail later, whether to help or not help earthly humanity to rise above that standard of living and thinking what now prevails, and whether to share or not share the knowledge and technologies that we have at our disposal and access to which people have lost during the last global cataclysms, which I mentioned above. Mixed with all this is an important and also rather ancient question about the legality of monoracial culture and interracial mixing. Among the right-wing radicals there are, and their own division into ultra-radicals and moderates, while those who belong to the first group have always adhered to the doctrine of a monoracial society and the superiority of the Nordic race over the rest. They are not only opposed to sharing knowledge and technology with anyone, but also dream of setting up their own subordinate monoracial society on this planet and getting rid of or drastically reducing the ranks of all other representatives of the so-called colored races. Can you imagine what, as a rule, they inspire their various henchmen on the surface of this planet? I hope I will say a little more about this when we talk about this topic. Moderate radicals simply believe that everyone who inhabits this planet, or at least a vast majority, and representatives of colored races, in particular, are just a bunch of ignorant, self-righteous and lazy savages who are incapable of anything and, as a consequence, unworthy of the knowledge and technologies that they have us. They, however, like many other representatives of various groups that are not entirely friendly to you, whose ancestors also once preserved their knowledge and skills and about which I will say more than once, firmly convinced that today's people, however, as always throughout history, no more than a kind of obedient brute who does not ask questions and goes wherever he is directed. They are also ardent supporters of a monoracial society and are very intolerant of interracial unions and representatives of races other than the Nordic. Fortunately, as I said, there are no more than 40% of them in total and they are in the minority. The rest belong to the group of moderates, of which I and my comrades in arms are also included. Our ancestors, however, like us now, have always been of the opinion that the weak and lacking knowledge always have the right and the chance to help. It was our ancestors who were among those who are known to you from myths as civilizing gods. However, like many other groups that retain knowledge and technology, they were among those who tried to raise humanity from its knees at least a little and give them the basics of those skills that would be useful for them to survive and not to run wild. However, as you have noticed from the title, we adhere precisely to moderate views, which means we still act within certain limits. So, for example, we do not support the idea of creating a monoracial society on this planet as ultra-radicals and are tolerant of all representatives of others. We honor the laws of creation and the personal qualities of a person, regardless of his race or confession. However, our moderation is as follows. Despite all of the above, we have always strictly adhered to by virtue of certain genetic laws and the laws of creation that are above us, and we are not subject to the doctrines of monoracial marriages exclusively in our ranks. Otherwise, over the past thousands of years that our clans exist, we would not have been able to preserve knowledge of skills and certain genetic characteristics inherent in our species, which are responsible, for example, for longevity or the absence of many diseases and strong immunity, while I said many of us are quite tolerant of interracial marriages on this planet, believing that everyone has free will to commit this or that act and, accordingly, be responsible for everything. And so we never interfere or suggest anything that runs counter to this order of things. In our own ranks, we are forced to observe this law very strictly due to the above circumstances. As for knowledge and technology, I will give a small analogy. For radicals in general, both moderate and ultra-persuasive, people are like ragamuffin children, dirty and unintelligent, always asking for handouts, which, of course, they are not going to throw them. We believe that children, figuratively speaking, should be shod, dressed well fed and warm, but in no case should they be allowed to play matches with firearms or sharp objects. In short, what they do not understand at all and do not have the necessary qualities and knowledge to manage it without harming themselves or others. There are two types of technologies that we would very much like to introduce into your society, but this is very often hindered by people who are not profitable and those that even we, with all our respect for people, would not dare to introduce into your society, since at this moment, and it is difficult to disagree with this, the majority are simply not prepared for them, or their implementation will be fraught with irreversible negative consequences for you. This is also our certain moderation.